So
right.
I think we have got a keynote from Kerri talking about shame and stigma of addiction. We don't know much about that, do we?
Nope,
But
not at
the good
all.
news is we can get over that shame and stigma and learn to live a life that we love, that we create. So take it
Absolutely.
away, Kerri.
All right, guys. So, as you guys already know, I introduced myself as somebody who has been on the street struggling, since I was 14, but really since I was a little child. And I want to go back to the very first conversation I had in this meeting today, this summit with Anita, about beliefs and habits and behaviors. So when I grew up with two amazing parents who were doing the very best they could, raising 6 kids and trying to provide. And so in that experience, there was a lot of loneliness, and there was a lot of reaction, and there was a lot of yelling, just because people were doing the best they could with what they had. But I took that experience of loneliness and yelling and not getting my needs met, of being comforted, nurtured, and supported, to mean I was bad, and to mean I wasn't good enough. So I created this story around I literally was a waste of space. And so I needed to escape that idea as quickly as possible. And so at 14 years old, I dove headfirst into sex and drug addiction. Sex because I was looking for the love that I never received from my parents, or at least I believed I didn't receive from my parents. And then drugs because I wanted to numb out from myself, because I truly believed I was a bad person. But as I shared earlier, I've spent years since I was 14 starting to study psychology, theology, philosophy, the biology of our brain, really wanting to understand my parents. How can you have 6 kids and be emotionally unavailable? But in doing so, what I really discovered was shame and guilt, is that we operate so often from this belief that how we show up in this world is impacting others, or that what we do isn't good enough. And so we sit in this ruminating ideology of, oh, it's my fault my mother didn't love me. Oh, it's my fault that my boss is mad that we missed the quota. Oh, it's my fault. Or for me, it's I'm not good enough until I become CEO despite not finishing high school. I need to prove my worth by continuing to climb the corporate ladder. And yet every success I made, it just wasn't good enough because I'm guilty. I'm bad. I'm not enough. That's the ideology that I had. And so once I hit my late teens, like Trisha, I experienced sexual trauma. I was raped twice, immediately shame. Totally my fault. I deserved it because I have never been good enough. I've done all these bad things. I continue to do drugs, which society says is bad. I continue to have sex, chasing love, which society says is bad. I definitely deserve this, and I definitely deserved what I got. And so I really started to sit in that shame. And of course, when you experience a trauma, particularly sexual trauma, domestic violence as well. I experienced domestic violence. There's a lot of shame. It's your fault. You caused the person to react. You caused the person to hit. You caused. And it wasn't until I had an experience where a person said to me essentially that they were going to break my spirit, that I kind of had the same experience Trisha had in the room. She's like, oh my God, I can't do this seat for 30 years. I said, oh my God, I'm never going to let somebody ever tell me that they can break my spirit, even if I think that I'm not good enough. And it was the greatest gift that I was ever given, because it forced me to start to look at my beliefs. So looking at, okay, what is it that causes me to believe that I need to live in shame, right? What is it that causes me to believe that I am guilty? Okay, I'm guilty because my parents always yelled at me, right? Is that true? Is that really true? And so I started coming from a place of curiosity. And this is where I work extensively with people. And what I really want to impress upon all of you today is we make up stories. We label things good or bad, right or wrong. And yet, if you look at any of the great spiritual texts from the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Tao Te Ching, and Buddhism, right? It's the last judgment is freedom from judgment, guys. Like that's just the crux of it. So judging is what keeps us in guilt. We judge an experience as right or wrong. And if we deem it wrong, we have now condemned ourselves to guilt and suffering because we were bad. But what if what you did in that moment was the only thing you knew how to do, right? Because as Barb shared earlier today, she gossiped. Why? She didn't know any other way. She had never been role modeled any other behavior. And so she was operating from a natural default pattern of behavior. And yet, most people would look at Barb and we would condemn her. Oh, she's a gossip. She's a bad boss. And that's what I did for myself. I looked at myself and I immediately judged myself. And then I decided, well, I continuously judge myself. I continuously sit in this pattern of shame, feeling completely worthless, unable to cope, and needing to drink or numb out through working from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. I was not really available for my children in their formative years for that reason. I wasn't around. And really, when I was around, I was stuck in guilt because I felt like I was a horrible parent because I yelled at my kid because I was tired and cranky and didn't know how to take care of myself. I said, all right, well, let's come from a place of curiosity. And this is where I differ from some people. When I work with people, I don't ask people to quit the substance unless it's an immediate threat into their physical danger, and then I don't work with them because I want people to start to get curious. All right, I drank a bottle of wine last night. What were the factors that led up to me picking up that bottle of wine? Did I have a stressful day at work? How many hours of sleep did I get? What did I eat, if anything? We probably didn't. What needs, if any, did I meet of my own before I showed up to take care of my children or my husband or my responsibilities at work? With awareness, we can then start to get information that will allow us to move forward and make a different choice. Right. And so rather than saying I am a piece of crap for drinking that bottle of wine, which is the natural default, man, I'm super crappy, I stopped. And I started to ask myself, okay, what was it that caused me to lean into that bottle of wine? Now, I do want to preface this by saying, again, I have been studying psychology and neurolinguistic program and all of these different behaviors for many years. So what I would do was I would substitute a behavior that was harmful or kept me disempowered and in that guilt and shame cycle for one that was more supportive. So for example, my mother would call. Huge trigger for me. I'd immediately start to go in that guilt shame trap, go to the refrigerator like Trish says, go to get that bottle of wine and say, okay, wait a minute. Why am I getting this bottle of wine? All right, yeah, I'm super upset. Is this in my best interest? Sometimes, guys, the answer was yes. And I gave myself permission to drink it because I knew that if I didn't, I was just going to ruminate. Other times, nope, I'm not going to do this. What's something that I can do that's more nurturing and supportive? I'm going to go for a walk in nature. because I understand that 20 minutes in nature has better cardiovascular effects on your heart than even an hour's worth of cardio. And it grounds you. There's minerals that you're absorbing that naturally help regulate your system. And so really it was me giving myself permission to get curious, to stop condemning myself for the behavior that I knew what to lean into, right? To stop the suffering, to stop that guilt, to stop that shame, and start to understand why it was I felt compelled to do that in the first place. And in that curiosity, I was then able to question my beliefs. A belief such as, you'll never be successful in life if you don't get a college degree. A belief that says you have to work 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. to achieve success, to achieve the pinnacle of what people chase after in order to be fulfilled. And I asked myself, is this a real belief? Does this belief serve me? Because at the end of the day, I'm certainly not happy I've achieved this success, but I'm still drinking because I'm not happy. And there was a big disconnect. I wouldn't have gotten there from the place of shame and guilt. I had to come from curiosity. Now, I've studied theology and I've also studied the science behind it. And there is a lot of literature and work around the science of emotions and the frequency of energy that they emit, guys. So the reality is we are all energetic beings, and all of our emotions carry an energy with them. And for people who may have a hard time leaning into stay childlike, which Christ says, or, what a man thinketh, which Buddha says, why not go and study it from a scientific perspective? Shame and guilt are two of the lowest vibrating energetic frequencies that a human can exist in. All right, there's so much scientific data. Dr. David R. Hawkins created this map of consciousness using a logarithmic scale, which is a scale that it measures the vibrations in the earth from an earthquake, and kinesiology, muscle testing, which is becoming more and more prolific because it works on the individual rather than a whole collective of people and how we need to heal them. And they were able to measure these emotions. And so what I use with my clients is I give them scientific evidence that shows them guilt and shame. If you really look at people who suffer with chronic illness, who get pervasive cancers, who have autoimmune diseases, who struggle with relapse over relapse, it's because they're operating with a belief system that causes them to sit in that guilt and shame. And so when you give them that scientific evidence, that map, which for any of you out there, Google it, it's online. There's the book Power versus Force that speaks extensively about it, right? It's very dense though, so you have to really to get into it. But the reality is you have an understanding that gives you permission to start to get to a place of curiosity, right? Because so often we feel guilty for not feeling guilty. We live in a society that says that if I feel too good for too long, there's something wrong with me. And I struggled with that immensely. I started to break free from feeling guilty about how I parent, losing my temper with my teenage daughter for yelling at me. And then I would start to go back to, wait a minute, I need to feel guilty because I don't feel guilty about being human, about having a human reaction. Why? Because I sat there in curiosity. Oh yeah, that's right. I haven't eaten today. I just worked with a client, and like Trisha reminded me, I didn't stop to pause to leave that baggage at the door. And then you give yourself permission to learn. And it's from that place of curiosity and freedom from judgment, and i.e. labels, good, bad, right or wrong, mental health, this, that. And that's why I really align with Trisha personally. And I want everybody to understand, all of us on this panel are here to empower you to do what's right for you. So again, if going to meetings serves you, I encourage you to go to meetings. If working with Trisha serves you, I encourage you to work with Trisha. If studying the map of consciousness serves you, study the map of consciousness. But it's giving yourself permission to come from a place of curiosity, not judgment, because the judgment is what gets you in that guilt. It tells you that you're good. It tells you that you're bad. And when you identify as either one of those, good or bad, right now you're seeking externals for validation that you're good, or you're seeking to numb out to avoid feeling bad, when at the end of the day, every experience you're having provides you with an opportunity to learn yourself further, to learn more beliefs that you've been embedded with, to learn more habits that you lean into. And it's a layering effect, and it's a peeling the onion one peel at a time until you get to a strong understanding of what you need for yourself in order to take care of yourself, in order to nurture yourself. Because we seek externally what at the end of the day we can only get for ourselves internally. We can only provide for ourselves internally. And you're not going to get that from guilt. You're going to get it from curiosity. So my encouragement and my ask of all of you is look up the map of consciousness, reach out to me or many other people. It's becoming prolific in many areas of work, and start to get information around how to give yourself the permission you need from yourself to shift out of that shame, to shift out of that guilt. And the last thing I want to touch upon before I end is the reality is you want to provide yourself with a safe space to talk about some of those shame stories, right? For a long time, I sat in suffering thinking I was bad for being raped twice. I was bad for stealing from my parents to buy people stuff at school because I was so lonely. I was trying to buy friendship. I was bad. And until I sat in a space with somebody who would literally lean in and love me exactly where I was at and not condemn me, but just witness me, I wasn't able to release that shame. But when I was able to let it go and let it out and allow myself to speak voice to it, I was then able to myself look at from a place of curiosity, but wait a minute. Did you steal because you were a bad person? Or did you steal because you were 8 years old, never getting your needs met? You were a weird kid in school and you were trying to buy friendship because I felt so lonely. When you can look at it from that lens, you break free from that place of shame and recognize you truly were doing the very best you could with the information and circumstances that you had growing up and up into this point. And that's why I love Maya Angelou when she says, people do better when they know better, and they do the best they can with what they have. And that's why addiction recovery is passion, my passion, and mental health recovery, because I truly know in my heart people are doing the best they can, and it is my responsibility to hold space for them until they know better to do differently. Thank you guys so much for your time.